The Legend of Zelda was first released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in Japan as the Hyrule Fantasy Zelda no Densetsu on February 21, 1986. It wouldn't be released in the United States for another year, but when it did, it changed the face of video games forever. Even though other role-playing games had begun to emerge, The Legend of Zelda gripped the nation of video gamers in ways that nothing had before. It told a story that resonated with American audiences in a very unique way. There were two basic pillars that the game was built on: the hero being guided by a deep spiritual purpose to save a princess and a kingdom, and elaborate dungeons filled with puzzles and mazes that would keep you busy for hours. The reason Zelda was so irresistible was held mainly in its storyline immersion. No other mainstream console game at the time put you into the action of a novel the way Zelda did, in contrast to other games like Super Mario Bros., which also had the player chasing a princess from castle to castle, trying to save a kingdom. Zelda provided a depth that hadn't been seen before, with lore unfolding as you discover new realms and talk with new people. It was the first the world had experienced true role-playing in a visual digital format. In addition to the deep story immersion the game provided, it also played heavily on the dominant trend of Christianity at the time. Its tabletop predecessors like Dungeons and Dragons were heavily demonized in the 1980s and targeted heavily by evangelical groups. The Satanic Panic was fueled by fundamentalist televangelists of the 80s. Zelda set itself apart from this by identifying good and evil as Christian and satanic forces, with elements like crosses in temples, Christian-inspired clergy, and the actual religious buildings of the game. This opened doors for the game that would have been closed if it had followed the influence of tabletop games. A prime example of this can be seen in Roman churches like Santa Sabina. If you look at the design of Santa Sabina with its high-shouldered Byzantine walls, elaborate tall windows, and glorious interior, you can imagine heroes from the ancient world coming to the church for strength before a battle or forgiveness once it's done. The grandiosity of Santa Sabina is a testament to the strength of the early Christian church and the power of its monotheistic God. Its narrow width and long body create a visual sense of dominating presence above someone standing in front of it, while making an imposing silhouette to viewers in the distance. Even the artwork of the church shares a commonality with the early depiction of spirituality of the game, being one of the oldest locations in history to display publicly the image of the crucifixion of Christ in a relief on its doors. The building style can be seen in places such as the Temple of Time in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time presented a unique opportunity for the player to truly experience the grandiosity of these religious buildings and enhance the urgency of the quest. Even though, by its release in 1998, the traditional Christian symbolism had been abandoned, it could still be seen in many aspects of its architecture. In a completely different part of the world, a Mesopotamian civilization constructed a giant underground city that resonates with heroic adventure. The city of Derinkuyu was discovered in 1963 when a man knocked down a wall in his basement, revealing a sprawling underground city fit for any Zelda dungeon. The city, carved from volcanic rock, is 18 stories and 256 feet deep, and contains an intricate maze of residences, markets, and official buildings. The artwork recovered from Derinkuyu is surprising, where one would expect mostly pagan artifacts. Many crosses and Christian art was discovered. This is because the city was built in the 8th century BC and used for thousands of years until it was last abandoned in 1923. Many different cultures have made use of it, both as a shelter and a stronghold. As new cultures would come to dominate Derinkuyu, traces of the previous culture were gradually erased. The last group to inhabit the city was expelled when the last Christians in Turkey were forced to leave for Greece. These two locations relate to each other in the very spirit of adventure. A large, looming, sacred building that imposes its will in a blunt, obvious way, and a secret city woven by mazes and puzzles. You can see the motivation for the adventure at the surface above ground with Santa Sabina, as well as the spirit of adventure underground with Derinkuyu, also reflected in The Legend of Zelda, with locations such as the Temple of Time, Hyrule Castle, and Kokiri Village, as the motivation for the adventure and dungeons like the Fire Temple, the Forest Temple, and the infamous Water Temple as the spirit of the adventure.